This is the kind of story that will hit you in the chest, especially if you're a parent. A baby boy drowns in a bathtub after his mom allegedly leaves the bathroom, leaving him unattended. She's now facing several charges, including manslaughter. She first told police allegedly that she was only out of the bathroom for roughly 60 to 90 seconds. But then more information came to light showing that time was allegedly much longer. But this mom has people on her side saying all of this was just a tragic accident. We'll take a look at what her side of the story could be. We're on the case presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. Cases like this one that we're following out of Arkansas, they are heartbreaking, they're tragic, and they also seem to spark a lot of debate because they raise the question of, is what we're talking about actually a crime? Now let's break down what we know at this point about what happened. This is according to KAIT-TV, which is in Arkansas. It reviewed the court documents related to the case of a woman named Courtney Newsom. She's a 31-year-old mom of two. Here's a picture of Courtney with the victim in this story. That is her 1-year-old son, Brady. Police responded to Newsom's home in Brookland, Arkansas on August 7th. This is a small town. It's outside of Memphis, Tennessee, just about an hour's drive from Memphis over the Tennessee state line. Now, when police arrived, they found Newsom giving her son chest compressions. She allegedly told officers that she was giving her son and daughter a bath in the morning. They first went in the tub around 6:55. Then she said she stepped away for 60 to 90 seconds max. When she returned, that is when she made a horrifying discovery, a parent's worst nightmare. She said she found her son, quote, laying on his back with water over his lips and nose, and that she grabbed him out of the tub and started CPR. Police rushed the boy to the hospital, and he was in critical condition. According to her Facebook page, the hospital that her son was taken to was actually the same one that she works at. Newsom has worked in healthcare for a decade, according to friends who are trying to raise money for her defense in this case. Newsom's son was transferred from that hospital to another hospital in Memphis for further care, but that is where he died 6 days after law enforcement arrived at Newsom's home after the 911 call saying that she had found him unresponsive in the tub. It's impossible to know or comprehend the pain that Newsom and her family are now feeling. This is the type of tragedy that lasts a lifetime. But this case is also a criminal investigation. A little more than a month after the boy died, police brought Newsom in for a Mirandized interview to try and figure out what exactly happened. Now, it reportedly came to light during that interview that there's more information about just how long Newsom was allegedly away from the bathroom. Remember, she first said it was 90 seconds max. But in this interview, Newsom allegedly told police that she put her son and daughter in the tub. Again, it was just before 7 o'clock in the morning. And then she left the bathroom to put her daughter's phone in her backpack. And then she admits that she, quote, lost track of time. She then allegedly tells officers that she was gone much longer than that 60 to 90 seconds that she first said. She texted her mom at 7 o'clock in the morning, and then she called her mom at 7:14 in the morning. And according to those court records reviewed by the local TV station, police believe that the children were left alone in the tub unattended for roughly 15 minutes. Now, remember, Newsom said that she also put her daughter in the tub. It is unclear if that girl was injured in this incident. On October 11th, police took Newsom into custody. On October 15th, a judge in Arkansas found probable cause for her to face charges including manslaughter. Right now, Newsom is also facing recklessly causing death and 2 counts of third-degree endangering the welfare of a minor. Now, those 2 counts are Class B misdemeanors, and the manslaughter and reckless death charges are Class C felonies. And Class C felonies can mean between 3 and 10 years in prison if found guilty in Arkansas. Before her arrest, Newsom posted several tributes to her son on social media. In fact, on the day police say the boy died, she posted this picture with him and commented, quote, "Thank you for the prayers." She also posted this picture with the caption, "My baby boy." That was on August 22nd. She then posted this, accepting donations on Cash App to help pay for funeral expenses after she said people reached out to see if they could help. Originally, Newsom's bond was set at $35,000. That was on the day of her arrest. A couple days later, it was lowered to $15,000, and she was able to post that and get out of jail, according to KAIT TV. Friends, though, appear to be coming to her defense. There's a GoFundMe that's raised more than $1,000 to, quote, support Courtney Newsom's legal battle. It says that Courtney and her husband lost their son to a very tragic accident. The GoFundMe appears to have been launched when Newsom was still in jail, and it reads, quote, Courtney was already broken over the loss, but now she is also terrified, alone, and with no information on how to contact her family. Courtney Newsom is next set to appear in court in this case on November 25th. Joining us now to talk more about this case is criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor John Day. It's a tough story because you do, in some ways, you can see the emotion on the mom in her mugshot, and I think in these cases we've seen them before. Whether it's I think of some of the hot car cases we've seen, and then in this one where you have a 1-year-old in a bathtub. What goes into the decision by a prosecutor whether or not this is going to be a criminal case?
Right, Chris. Well, thanks for having me. And yeah, tough cases, tough calls. Prosecutors are looking at this. First of all, is there any sort of intentional act here? Is there anything on the part of the mother or the parent, whoever it is, other than just, clear recklessness, bad decision making, something like that? The prosecutor, of course, they're always going to say we have to represent the best interest of the community. We have to represent the best interest of this, the poor dead infant who was, just simply sitting in a bathtub when the mother, according to law enforcement, the mother left and was inattentive for up to 14 minutes. So prosecutors are looking at this. Yeah, was it intentional? No, according to them. Was there something that the mother did that was just a stupid, reckless act that left a child dead? Yes. And so prosecutors are going to be saying, we've got to do something here. We can't just ignore the fact that a parent was not acting as a parent when they left their child for 14 minutes. So the manslaughter charge, I think that would be something you'd see throughout the U.S., no matter what the jurisdiction is, unless there was something to enhance it, and unless there was some indication that the mother was doing something else, was there substances involved? Was there, we see cases all the time where parents leave a child in a car and they're at the gym or they're at a casino or they're shopping and it's, 130 degrees in the car. So sadly, we see a lot of these kind of cases, and prosecutors are always going to charge some level of criminal offense just to get the point across that parents can't do this.
Well, and I think of, according to the reports that we've seen, she initially said it was between 60 and 90 seconds that she was out of the bathroom. And then in reality, and it appears just the way the stories we've seen were written, she came forward with this information, but police would know it from her cell phone, that it was actually it was 7, she texted at 7 a.m. and then she's on the phone at 7:14 a.m. As a former prosecutor, the differences between what she told investigators at the time to what the reality actually is, does that factor into the decision of whether or not you charge her with some pretty serious crimes?
It does factor into the decision on what to charge, because, the statement to the police, of course, this parent is trying to minimize their culpability here. They're trying to minimize their guilt. Well, I was only gone for 60 to 90 seconds when, in fact, when you look at, according to police, when you look at the phone records, it could be up to 14 minutes. And that's a huge amount of time to leave an infant. I mean, anyone who's a parent, anyone who has a child understands you don't leave an infant alone, even for a second, in a bathtub, in a tub of water. And so that, that also goes into the prosecutor's decision making, the fact that the mother was trying to minimize this. Of course, defending this case, you'd be saying, look, this was a horrible tragedy. It's a traumatic event for the mom. Does she know what she's saying when she talks to the police and says, I was only gone for 60 to 90 minutes? Defending it, you're trying to minimize that statement as a product of the trauma that she's just experienced. But at the end of the day, prosecutors are going to be saying, look, she lied to the police. She was trying to cover herself and explain away her actions and her behavior. So yeah, that does definitely go into the the mind of the prosecutor when they're trying to decide what to charge.
Yeah, and as far as before we get to the defense's part of it, so often in these cases you see the information that you can get from a cell phone company about the activity on a smartphone. I guess what type of information have you seen that you can actually pull out to show that she was not just, okay, she texts at 7 a.m. and then she's making a phone call at 7:14, but potentially that there was activity going on between that time? I mean, how can you prove that she was not in the bathroom for up to 14 minutes?
Right. Well, prosecutors, I mean, this could be circumstantial too, but prosecutors are going to have a wealth of information from that cell phone. You can find out, was she texting? Who was she texting? What was she saying? Was she totally distracted? I mean, did she make phone calls? Of course, the cell phone records are going to be incredibly valuable to the prosecutor to say, look, this was this time period. She claims it was 60 to 90 seconds. Clearly, this activity was taking place on a much greater scale. Many more things were occurring if there are texts and phone calls in between. So it does give you a snapshot in time of what was taking place. It's not the same as, say, a body camera from a police officer that shows those 14 minutes, if that's what it was. But again, we get the same, as you mentioned, you get the same situation with parents leaving a child in a hot car unattended, parents leaving a child even on a freezing day in a car. And the claim by parents is often, well, I just ran in for a second, I was going to come right back. But tragically, you see these cases again and again where the parent's statement does not match up to the actual evidence, whether it's eyewitnesses or digital evidence from a cell phone.
And as far as the timeline of this case, it was, several months ago, it was in August, believed that the child passes away, and then the interview with investigators is in September, and it was only on October 15th that a judge found probable cause to charge her with manslaughter as well as some other charges. Why does it take so long in some of these cases to get to this point?
Well, it could take so long because the police are investigating, talking to family members, talking to neighbors, talking to anyone who had contact with the mother and the children to see if there was anything that would indicate there was any kind of a history of any kind of abuse. They want to make sure they get all the medical records from the medical investigator, the coroner, whoever's doing an autopsy, for example. They're trying to put the pieces together of the investigation so that when they do charge, they're satisfied that they've got more than enough to carry it over the line of the beyond a reasonable doubt if it goes to trial on in this case, a manslaughter charge, a child abuse type charge. So the reason it takes a long time is because you're waiting on things like medical records and interviews with people who might have had some contact with the mom and the child.
And I know you work in New Mexico. This is a case out of Arkansas. There's differences often between states with how certain charges go. But I see that she's facing a charge of not just manslaughter, but there's also a felony charge of recklessly causing death. Why would someone be charged with both of those?
Well, because the prosecutors are trying to cover all their bases, they've got the manslaughter charge. And each jurisdiction is going to have a slightly different set of laws and jury instructions and elemental instructions on what these charges are going to relate to. But the prosecutors are trying to throw as wide a net as possible, knowing that when it comes time to try the case, if that's where it goes, that they have got all their bases covered, that they can convince a jury not only, was this a clear case of manslaughter, for example, but that the behavior of the mom was reckless in leaving the child alone, even for a second. And then, depending on what the investigation showed, where did she go? Where did she go in the house? What did she do? Was she on the phone? What was distracting her that takes this case and raises it to the level of recklessness? What was the mom's behavior that explains or defines recklessness? And so that was obviously part of the investigation, but the prosecutors are going to wait until they're able to nail that down. So if they're in front of a jury, they can say it's manslaughter, and it's also based on this behavior of the mom that no caring parent would ever engage in. So that's what they're trying to do, is make sure that when it does go to a jury, that they've got all their ducks in a row.
I know we have a long way to go until a trial or a potential conviction in this case, but in Arkansas, both of those charges we were just talking about, they're Class C felonies, and they come with prison time between 3 and 10 years. How likely is it, based off what we know at this point, if it is true that she left a child unattended in a bathtub for 14 minutes and that child passes away, even if it was an accident and she lost track of time, as she's saying, if found guilty, how likely is it that you would see a prison term for this mom?
Well, this is where it gets even harder, Chris, because, on the one hand, if she takes a plea or is convicted at trial, you've got the history, the backstory of a mom facing the worst possible situation that a parent can face in terms of the death of a child. And she, there's no indication that she intended for this to happen. So when it comes to sentencing, it's this balance between, we're trying to protect the community, protect, innocent young toddlers from parents who are acting, with recklessness and with this criminal disregard for the well-being of their children. And on the other hand, you've got a parent who, is grieving and is traumatized and feels an intense, most likely, an intense amount of guilt and shame, and that'll never go away. So sentencing, it comes down to a balance of what is is that the message to society and the community that if you are going to leave your child alone and something happens, you're going to pay a stiff price. On the other hand, you've got, is there some compassion for a parent who made an incredibly egregious, stupid, and ultimately deadly and fatal mistake, who's got to live with that the rest of their lives? And that's where it gets really tough. It depends on the community, what the community sense is, is there an outrage over this? Is there some level of compassion for a young mom? And that's where it gets really tough. Sentencing becomes really, really hard in these cases.
Because I think of, from the defense's point of view, if the prosecutors have the cell phone records that show that she was not in the bathroom for that long period of time, and 14 minutes is a lifetime for leaving a child who's 1 year old in a bathtub. But at the same time, to your point, I mean, there's that compassion part of it. I mean, if you're going up against that cell phone data, what is the defense to try and get her a not guilty verdict in this case?
Yeah, that's tough because remember, you're going to have members of the jury, people in the jury who are parents who, whether they're new parents or, it's been a long time, most likely you're going to have a large number of people who have had children, and they're going to be replaying in their own minds their own interactions with their children, their own caretaking skills. And, sure, there might be moments when someone on the jury is going to say, I did something really stupid once and luckily nothing happened, but I can see how it happens. If you're defending it, you're hoping that you can hit or connect with one of those jurors, at least several of the jurors, with some level of compassion to say this was the worst possible mistake this mom could have made. She didn't do it intentionally. It may have been reckless, but she didn't do it with any intent to hurt her child. I mean, that's what's going to differentiate this from a lot of other cases where there's intentional child abuse, obviously. But at the same time, the prosecution's theme throughout the entire trial, if that's where it goes, is going to be, look, if you're a parent, you have a heightened responsibility. You can't walk away for 14 minutes. You can't be on your phone. And this is something that everybody knows. And this mom knew it, and she chose to ignore that responsibility. So it's going to be this clash in court, if that's where it goes, of the two sides, the defense trying to open up some level of empathy among jurors, acknowledging that this was tragic, acknowledging that this was a fatal situation for this poor little kid, but at the same time saying, look, here's a mom who didn't mean this to happen, and how harsh and how severe are we going to be on the mom? And it's a balancing test, and it's going to come down to what the community's like, whether there's any level of outrage or whether there's some level of sympathy.
Yeah, because what's the type of juror you would be looking for in this case if you were the defense? Because I could see on one hand the parent, and you hit on the emotional string of this woman is going to live, convicted or not, with a lifetime of guilt and every negative emotion that you can think of for what happened likely. But then on the same hand, I could see some parents with almost anger and frustration that she would allegedly leave a child for more than a dozen minutes. Yes, there was another child in the tub with it, but another young child as well. Leaving a child unattended, no adults around. I could see a lot of parents getting frustrated hearing that information.
Yeah, and that's where it gets tough, because any parent on that jury there might be some level of sympathy, there might be some level of ability to relate to a parent in a bad situation, but every single parent on that jury is going to say, yeah, I had some bad situations. I never left my child alone in that kind of a situation. My child never got hurt or died as a result of my inattention. So on the one hand, yeah, there might be some ability to generate a certain level of sympathy. On the other hand, every single parent in that jury, if there are parents, are going to be saying, look, I had some bad days, but this never happened to me. And it's, I'm outraged that this poor child is not with us anymore. So that's where it gets really, really hard.
And inside a district attorney's office, state's attorney, prosecutor's office, in these really tough cases where you're trying to think about what the charges are going to be, whether you bring charges at all, I mean, what is that meeting like? Is it just one meeting? I mean, what's that day like inside the office? How many people are involved with making that call?
Well, Chris, in my experience, a case like this is going to be, depending on the size of the office, obviously, but it's going to be at the forefront of what the office is looking at. You're going to have meetings with, the elected district attorney, if that's who it is, and probably a good group of experienced line prosecutors, trial prosecutors. Decision making ultimately is at the top, but the prosecutors are going to be thinking to themselves, "This is my client is not only the community at large, but it's especially in this case, it's going to be this little child who died, and I'm representing that child's interest essentially in this case, and I'm speaking for somebody who doesn't have a voice and won't have a voice." And so prosecutors, this really hits prosecutors home hard, especially if they're parents. I got to say, I mean, when I was a prosecutor, whenever I did cases involving kids, it was really hard because I thought of my own, situation with my own child. So it becomes very personal, I think, for law. Even the most professional prosecutors never lose that, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, you want prosecutors to have that sense of, I'm doing my job. I'm representing the community. I'm representing a young victim who can't speak to us anymore. That's the message they want to get to the jury. Of course, the defense has, the opposite message, which is I'm representing my client. I'm up against this whole, the state has a lot of resources. The state has a lot of money, and perhaps we don't on the defense side. But the prosecuting decisions are made. They're not going to be made lightly, but they're also going to be made with the sense that this is our job as prosecutors to protect little victims like this.
Yeah, it's a tough job on both sides, especially in cases like this. John Day, former prosecutor, criminal defense attorney. Always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for being with me.
Thanks, Chris.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.